NATO collapse, American mercenaries in Ukraine, Russia possibly launching the Poseidon nuclear supertorpedo, the Russian Sea of Azov. All these so-called news have one thing in common – the boundless imagination of the fake news makers and their blind reliance on the stupidity of their target audience. Detector media did all the dirty fact-checking work for you. We have separated real facts from those of a parallel universe. My name is Vadym Miskyi. In the next 10 minutes I will tell you about the most impressive examples of the Kremlin propaganda, as well as about certain international publications that use unverified sources of information. Here we go. NATO will definitely face a collapse if it continues its anti-Russian course. Pro-Kremlin media made this tragic prediction citing Douglas McGregor, a retired colonel and former senior advisor to the US Secretary of Defense. In his opinion, most alliance members prefer not to enter in an open military conflict with Moscow. Also, among the NATO members, it is just Poland that wants a war with Russia. NATO will vanish if support for Ukraine continues, predicts McGregor. Kremlin propagandists have always ignored journalistic standards. What we mean is, firstly, getting your data from several authoritative sources. Secondly, analyzing the reputation of speakers whose words were used to cook up the misleading conclusions. However, this has proven effective for Russian propaganda. They often use the opinion of a retired military or a minor politician and present it as the official position of a country. Almost since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war in Ukraine, McGregor has been constantly talking about Kyiv's inevitable defeat. The reason for his odd statements about the alliance is obvious. NATO countries will never recognize the Russian annexation of Ukrainian territories.
First 5 days, Russian forces, I think, frankly, were too gentle. They've now corrected that. So I would say another 10 days, this should be completely over. But the question is, what is it that Zelensky is going to do? The Russians have made it very clear what they want is a neutral Ukraine. This could have ended days ago if he accepted that. And then they can adjust the borders. But the eastern part of Ukraine is firmly in Russian hands. But again, the Russians are not seizing territory. They're destroying Ukrainian forces. That's their focus.
NATO allies do not and will not recognize any of this territory as part of Russia. We call on all states to reject Russia's blatant attempts at territorial conquest. These lands are Ukraine. Donetsk is Ukraine. Luhansk is Ukraine. Kherson is Ukraine. Zaporizhzhia is Ukraine, just like Crimea is Ukraine.
$1,000 to $2,000 a day. That's what the US allegedly pays to recruit mercenaries in Ukraine. This fake was manufactured by the Kremlin media. As it goes, American mercenaries are hired to fight in Ukraine. To support this claim, they cite an announcement on the website of the American recruiting agency Silent Professionals. It is a job vacancy in the field of security and safety in Ukraine. However, it is worth mentioning that it is not about fighting in the war. The vacancy is for extraction protective agents. The employer is looking for specialists for evacuation operations in Ukraine. Stop Fake reports that the mass recruitment of mercenaries, according to the propagandists, it's really a handful of agents and teams for evacuation and extraction. This vacancy ad cannot be proof that mercenaries are fighting for Ukraine. Foreign citizens who do fight for Ukraine are not mercenaries. They are officially enlisted in the Ukrainian army. Foreign legionnaires join volunteer units. They do not demand money. Most of them have ideological reasons to defend Ukrainians. Obviously, the propagandists were inspired by the Russian army. The Russians have brought quite a lot of mercenaries to Ukraine, who are in it just for the money. Let's discuss geographical fakes now. As the propagandists claim, the Sea of Azov has become an exclusively Russian inland sea. Russian media cover this story a lot. They say it happened after the accession of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson regions to Russia. However, it is too early to print new maps. None of the democratic countries have recognized their referenda in the temporarily occupied regions of Ukraine. Ukraine's borders do not change as a result of these pseudo-votes. The fact that some territories are temporarily occupied doesn't deprive Kyiv of the right to its seas. Let's talk about media manipulations on nuclear issues. As claimed, NATO warned the allies about a possible launch of the Poseidon nuclear supertorpedo by Russia. The Italian newspaper La Repubblica wrote this, citing a NATO intelligence report. Several foreign and Ukrainian media outlets and bloggers picked up the story. The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation declared this information false. NATO did not publish these claims. Such groundless statements by the media only give the strength to Russia's informational terrorism. Even Russian propagandists, always eager to spread the news about the exercises of their strategic nuclear forces, this time were reluctant to quote La Repubblica. According even to them, such weapons are not very likely to be used. How to strike the viewer in the very heart with information to overwhelm them with emotions so strong that their critical thinking turns off entirely. Here is an example. The armed force of Ukraine opened fire at a convoy of refugees in Kharkiv region, killing 30. A compassionate person is instantly shocked and outraged. Russian propaganda media and pro-Russian bloggers spread this tragic news, citing Rodion Miroshnik, self-styled ambassador of the occupied part of the Lugansk region. They say this happened near Kupiansk, but while spreading this yet another fake, the propagandists made a few mistakes. According to fact-checkers from the Kharkiv Anti-Corruption Center, all messages of this type do not contain any video or photo evidence. Yes, in our age, when even rural Russian soldiers have iPhones, stolen of course. All of the pictures used by propagandists to illustrate this fake have nothing to do with it. The Kremlin media could not decide on the date of the attack and simultaneously claimed it was on September 25th, 27th and 29th. The propagandists also get lost in the types of weapons that were, as they say, used to fire at the convoy of refugees. Some talk about small arms, while others mention artillery. The devil is in the details, as we must always remember. The Security Service of Ukraine has confirmed that in late September Russians fired at a civilian convoy of 7 cars in the so-called grey zone between the occupied Svatove in Lugansk region and the liberated Kupiansk in Kharkiv region. This Russian propaganda story is yet another Kremlin's attempt to accuse the Ukrainian army of the same atrocities the Russian military is known to commit. On September 30th, a Russian missile attack on a civilian humanitarian convoy in Zaporizhia killed 30 people and injured almost 100. Neo-Nazis and Banderits, initially these mythical heroes, were the pretext for the full-scale invasion. Although later the Kremlin constantly changed the motives for the attack on Ukraine, the propagandists did not abandon this story. They claimed that anyone who does not support Ukrainian nationalism will be executed in the liberated territories. That's very original and, most importantly, fresh. Anonymous Telegram channels are pushing the idea that the Ukrainian counteroffensive is about returning territories, not liberating people. People with different views live in the liberated towns and villages. Some were waiting for the Ukrainian army and others wanted to return to the USSR and praise the Russian invaders. However, no one from the Ukrainian military and the security service persecuted them, let alone threatened them with death for their views. Let us touch upon the manipulation regarding IDPs being, as propaganda says, abandoned by Ukrainian president's office. This story was spread by anonymous Telegram channels controlled by the Russian FSB. The scenario is simple. People, they say, believed Zelensky and moved to the government-controlled territory of Ukraine expecting to receive housing, job and compensation for the lost property. A few months later, however, no progress appears to have been made. Meanwhile, in Mariupol, housing is already being distributed, while in Ukraine not a single house was built during this time. So what is really happening? Ukraine and its international partners are trying to arrange as much housing for internally displaced as possible. They also provide preferential loans to buy real estate at 3% per annum and encourage entrepreneurs to provide IDPs with jobs. Ukrainian authorities, of course, cannot instantly solve all of the IDPs' problems. Still, they are working on it. Russia doesn't stop reporting fake victories. Russians buried 24 tons of ordnance in the Kherson region to stage a video about a military victory. Ukrainian war reporter Andriy Tsaplienko discovered a staged video produced by the Russians as a video report about a fake victory. He shared the footage from a recon drone. It later turned out that in the Kherson region, the Russians lined trenches with naval mine warheads. After that, the Russian tank supposedly destroyed a Ukrainian ammo dump with one shot. The formula is not new, but it is strange. So much time and effort are spent on props to obscure the real picture. We won't trade warm offices for trenches. According to the Kremlin propagandists, this is what all Ukrainian politicians think, without exception. They say some Russian MPs, unlike Ukrainian ones, went straight to the front line. Meanwhile, the Russian politicians are not in a hurry to go to the battlefield, only making excuses instead.
Повестка пришла прямо перед поездкой в Донбасс. И меня дома не было. Ну, на следующей неделе я поеду, обязательно явлюсь в военкомат.
This is false. According to Stop Fake fact-checkers, several current and former MPs personally joined the Ukrainian army to fight for the country. Among those who defend Ukraine from Russian invaders are MPs from the Holos faction, Roman Kostenko and Roman Lozynsky, and MPs from the European Solidarity faction, Mikhailo Zabrodsky, Volodymyr Vyatrovich and Andriy Parubiy.